Let's go ahead and get started. Assuming you're all in the right place, welcome. This is SciB CPRE 2310, Cybersecurity Concepts and Tools, and I am Joseph Zambrino. You just call me Professor Zambrino or Professor Joe or Joe, it doesn't really matter. For the next 15 weeks or thereabouts, I will be your guide through this very fun topic. And I can't really think of a more fun and exciting way to start a semester off than by starting with the catalog description and the syllabus information. So we will go through that today. Those of you sitting over here, can you see? Okay, you're all right over at that angle? All right, that's great. This is the catalog description. A lot of verbiage there, but really talking about cybersecurity and the tools we use to both protect systems as well as to attack systems and attack networks here. There's a long list of things in that catalog description. I think really first and most primary is this focus in this class of sort of the applied aspects, the laboratory experiments, the exercises for evaluating systems for vulnerabilities, understanding exploits, and actually conducting those exploits. Why does this course exist? Well, it's on the main core pathway for those of you who are either cybersecurity engineering as a major students or those who are in the cybersecurity minor. We'll start with a show of hands. Who here, just raise your hand, is majoring in cybersecurity engineering? Good, so I don't know, about 60%. Who among you are just having a minor in cybersecurity? Outstanding. And who is here just for fun? The trick question, we are all here just for fun. Okay, so you're in the right place, right? You're here because you're in the major or you're in the minor. And it's the broader goal of this class as well, beyond just a required class in your sequence towards your major or towards your minor. It's really to help improve your future career prospects as well, really by focusing on, you can call it cybersecurity analytical skills or just systems skills, understanding the debugging side of working with computing systems and networks. To an extent, you may not have been required to do so before. And we do so via a series of introductions of various types of attacks and defense tools, and also through this kind of self-awareness that we're still encouraging through all of your courses of the ethics side of cybersecurity. An alternate course title for 2310, it could have been called Introduction to Pen Testing. So ultimately that's what this course is. So it is an introduction to penetration testing, otherwise known as pen testing, and that's a word we'll be using quite a bit this semester. Pen testing is just a simulated attack against an organization or network. Now, what is interesting though about that is it's not simulated in the sense that it's fake. It's not simulated in the sense that it's not legitimate what you're doing when you're conducting pen testing. It's going to be using the same exact techniques and software than what a malicious actor would actually deploy. The big difference, what makes something pen testing or ethical hacking is the other term we'll be using, from actual malicious behavior is that concept of intent and permission of the target. And that goes to that quote I had on the very first slide there. But really, there's going to be some sort of contractual / legal agreement in place, and also, at the very least, some ethical shared understanding in place. But otherwise, you are learning in this class the tools and techniques that malicious actors are themselves also learning and applying. This class is not something we just kind of made up off the cuff. It's really directly related to the requirements of programs in cybersecurity engineering and the related minor. This program is accredited via ABET, which accredits all engineering and technology programs in the United States. And they have some requirements for some programs that would want to call themselves cybersecurity engineering. They're not as prescriptive of here's the exact technical things that you have to cover. They don't say you need to have a lab in this particular topic in this particular course, but they provide kind of high-level guidance for what a program is required to have to call itself an accredited cybersecurity engineering program. And also, ABET cares a lot about the process associated with the program. What processes do you have for review, for continual improvement, for assessing, and things like that. We are accredited and have been since its initiation under ABET, and we are also, I think more uniquely so, also accredited via a National Security Agency and their standards for what they call Centers for Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity. And those standards are quite a bit more descriptive. Again, not to the level of your particular lab needs to have this particular thing in it, but otherwise really saying that if you want to call yourself one of these centers of excellence, you need to have these type of experiences for your students. That does set Iowa State apart from other programs that maybe focus just on teaching maybe kind of conceptual cybersecurity concepts. And there are lots of certifications and other degree programs that really focus on, it's not memorization per se, but really here's the dictionary or the encyclopedia of cybersecurity concepts. Our program, through the NSA certification, also with some influence from the ABET side of things, really cares a lot about what you can actually do, not just what you actually know about. That makes this course a little unique. You won't find this exact same course at many other of our peer institutions. And it can be, and it should be, in our opinion, a hands-on applied discipline. And I think you'll improve those skills this semester. There was a time, I think, that any student at Iowa State who was in a computing-related major or minor, so that really applies to all of you, would not need, we're talking maybe 20 years ago now, would not need as much of this kind of basic sort of systems training that we do expect these days. It was just how things were back then, that to be able to be useful with computers, you had to, usually on your own, kind of figure out how to debug your own systems, understand command line, usage of your computers and configuration, and how to break things and repair them effectively. And now, it's probably for the better. Now everything is kind of, App Store and, instantly kind of done for you. And you can get by without really needing to learn those skills. That is a nice advantage you are going to have by being in this course, is it will force you, even independent of the cybersecurity context, but it will be in that context. It'll force you to get better at using a computer. It'll force you to think more about the underlying systems of the computing devices that you currently use. We really can't cover everything, and that's okay. As you would go off into industry, if you were to be in a pen testing team, you would be part of a team, an interdisciplinary team, and consequently you would not be expected to know everything about everything. You would have your own focus area, your own specialty, and you'd be working with others with different focus areas and different specialties. So even though you won't be like maybe a deep expert in all things, ultimately you are expected to have a relatively diverse computing systems skill set in terms of understanding things like how routers work beyond just kind of the textbook definition of how routers work, understanding major players in the personal computing space, so your Microsoft, your Linux, your Apple. I recently switched, I try to switch every few years back to an Apple laptop here. I have no idea what I'm doing, but as you see me struggle, you'll know that I'm also trying that lifelong learning of understanding new things. But you are expected to become sufficiently agile that you're not just someone who only knows Windows and can only handle Windows, or can only handle an Apple device and can't do anything else. You certainly also need to have some knowledge of programming to be successful in this field. This is not a programming course. Depending on your degree program, you may have some to none or maybe a lot of programming background and experience, but it is directly tied together. It's not just using existing tools, it's understanding how things can be automated, how things can be scripted. This is not a programming course, but those skills are things that you have to continue to develop to be good in this area. And again, while it's not a networking course, in some sense, cybersecurity engineers and those who are also learning this for your academic minor really have to gain sort of a true understanding of networking beyond what someone who's just studying networking necessarily needs to know. We do actually care in our discipline what this particular bit corresponding to this particular flag in this particular network packet is doing. because it becomes very real for us. It's not just an academic thing. We need to know how to set that particular flag to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish within our pen testing environment. So again, ethical hacking, pen testing is all about understanding the defenses and weaknesses of an organization's infrastructure, their networking, their computing infrastructure. When I say organization, it could be a company, it could be Iowa State University, it could be a particular club or other group here. There's a number of ways that we can conduct that pen testing and a number of different modes of approach we can undertake. And I list them here. This could also be thought of as a very rough course topic outline, but we'll get to a more legitimate course topic outline. We almost always start with some sort of information gathering phase, which doesn't feel as technical as some of the other topics, but it can become quite technical, which is understanding, learning, what kind of information is that organization already kind of leaking or providing to the public writ large, whether intentionally or unintentionally. That's information gathering. What can we learn about an organization that either they're okay with us knowing or did not realize that they were actually sort of sharing to us as the public? Then we tend to differentiate between sort of external testing and internal testing. What can I access from outside the organization's IT infrastructure, from just the capital I internet, right? What can I access? Separately, and done somewhat independently, what can I access once I am inside the network? Whether via gaining that access surreptitiously or just from the perspective of someone who is already granted some legitimate internal access. What are the limits of that access? What are the vulnerabilities associated with that access? Then we'll talk a decent amount about sort of the networking side, as well as near the end of the semester about the wireless networking aspects of security. That becomes a very large topic and not something we can really do in depth in this course. You'll have other opportunities in other courses to really gain some deeper expertise about wireless network security. But it's not just the networking side of things. We will talk this semester about social engineering. That becomes a tricky thing to do in a laboratory environment, and an academic laboratory environment. We're going to try, and you'll see a lab later this semester where it's a little synthetic because you're performing social engineering effectively on yourself, and so you're kind of fully aware of what's going on as you are doing it. But we will explore some of the tools and technology associated with that. We'll also have a module on physical security, and I literally mean physical when I say that word. Exploring what weaknesses can be taken advantage of with regards to actual locks and doors and key cards and things like that. We also play around with that in the lab. It's also a little synthetic in the same sense. We're not physically going to be breaking anything. We have a virtualized environment, so it's quasi-physical what we'll be doing in the lab, but we'll be talking about that this semester as well. And then in addition, a big focus of this class is bypassing authentication systems. Login, passwords, the underlying cryptography associated with that, what kind of techniques can be used by the ethical hacker really to bypass things, to probe things, to break into things. Start with a very informal class survey. Who here, and you just raise your hand, and I won't pick on you, who here already feels they know a decent amount of pen testing? Just a couple. And by the way, that's fine. I'm not going to test you on that right now. What's your name, though?
My name is Troy.
Troy, okay, thank you, Troy. So Troy and a couple others, not just Troy, knows a decent amount of pen testing. First off, that's great. There's a lot of opportunities, both here and sort of outside the university, to learn about these topics in a co-curricular or extracurricular kind of way. Participating in CDCs, joining the associated student groups, those are all great things, and I strongly recommend those. I like to do a version of this for every one of my classes, but it applies to this one specifically. So this is my own take on learning. This is my own very high-level philosophy. Again, I do this for almost every class. So this is for a cybersecurity class. It could be for a programming class or electromagnetic class or anything one could imagine. It's a 2x2 kind of grid here where the x-axis is one's perceived expertise, and I mean sort of self-perception. What's your comfort level, perceived comfort level with the material from low to high? It's a very qualitative way of looking at it. And then the y-axis is one's actual expertise in a given topic. What I externally evaluate as your expertise throughout the course of the semester. And I break that into a 2x2 grid where students tend to fall into a few different buckets here. We start with, and I guess green check mark means good. If you come into the semester, and Troy and others come into the semester having had some experience and feeling pretty good about their existing pen testing skills, and they're correct about that. Their perceptions are correct. They actually do have a decent amount of actual expertise. Well, that's great. I'm happy you're here. Your job is to continue to learn more. Not every class needs to be equally challenging as well, right? If you find that you do know a lot of these things already, that's great. Find ways to push yourself. I'll provide some opportunities for you as well. Find ways to push me to be better as well and just to improve the experience for the class as a whole. I'm happy you're here. You're going to do just fine, obviously. And then there's those, which may be a larger percentage of you, who don't feel that you have any pen testing experience. But in fact, maybe you do have some. That's not maybe that common, that you feel like you don't know things, but you actually do know a lot of things. I guess you'll be pleasantly surprised as the semester goes on that this class is relatively straightforward and you do a great job with it. You're obviously also going to be just fine. Now, for those of you, and I didn't ask for a show of hands, I know people don't want to feel that comfortable saying that, who you come into this semester and you say, well, this is the first time I've heard the term pen testing. I don't know anything about the things that Professor Zambrino has talked about so far. Now I'm worried. I wasn't worried, and now I'm worried. It's the first day of the semester. It's horribly cold outside. It's going to get colder, and I'm already worried about this class. You don't feel you know anything about this material, and in fact, where you are on the x-axis there, or the y-axis there, you don't actually know anything about this material. I should put an even larger green check mark there than I already have. You're in the right place. There's a reason you're in this course. This course was created for you. You are the target audience for this course. So come in, be a professional student, do your job, do your work, ask questions, and you're going to be great in this course. This course is for you. Less so for Troy. Troy will be fine and others will be fine, but this course is for you who are in that lower left-hand quadrant. I'm glad you're here is another way to say that. The only students, and I put a red check mark there, but that's a bit harsh. The only students who could have problems in this course or any course in which you fall into that lower right-hand quadrant there is if you feel like you really know this material coming in, and in fact, you have some gaps in your knowledge. And as I mentioned, sort of the laundry list of those topics, there's a lot of different aspects of this topic. Perhaps over time, you'll gain expertise in all of them, but it can be difficult when you're still at this maybe 2000 level in your curriculum. There's some risk there, some slight risk, but there is some risk there with regards to not feeling you have to put in the work because you already know all of this stuff. Again, if you really do know all the material, you're going to be fine. I would suggest to all students, come in on day one today with just a little bit of humility, a desire to learn, and a willingness to put in the effort. You're going to do just fine in this course. I said I do that for every course. The other kind of high-level visualization I do for every course is another graph here, which I'm applying it to sort of undergraduate learning, but I think it probably applies to anything that is worth doing, anything that's worth getting better at. So here the y-axis is something good. Maybe a better phrase would be something I'd like to improve upon, whether it's ethical hacking and pen testing and cybersecurity, whether it's weightlifting or something, it doesn't matter, improving your chess ELO. Something that's considered good to be better at, something I would like to improve, and then our x-axis here is over time. And the quote I really like from this former Stanford professor, is a little bit of slope makes up for a lot of y-intercept. It's just sufficiently nerdy that I like it here. The idea being our y-intercept is where we are starting on day 1 of the semester. It's another way of looking at your perceived or your actual expertise here, how much I know about a topic. And I think it really does depend on the course. We do all come in at different places in terms of just our ability, our interests, things we learned before we came to Iowa State. It doesn't really matter. We all start at different y-intercepts here, our starting position. But a little bit of slope, makes up for a lot of y-intercept, which is just to say over time, the two lines kind of cross each other eventually, which is those who are committed to learning, who are willing to kind of read and learn and try and fail and debug and continue on. Eventually you can make up for a lot of that perhaps hidden background knowledge that you either know or think that you don't necessarily know as well. So our goal is to, at least in this class for this semester, focus on our slope of knowledge, gaining knowledge on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis here. Let's meet the staff. You've already now met me. Professor Joe is fine. If you don't like Zambrino, I sometimes have been known to give a quiz question where I ask if you know the spelling of my last name, but there it is documented. My office hours, I think that is set, are going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock. Feel free to come today. I don't know, if you just want to come by and introduce yourself, that's perfectly fine. I should be in my office at those times. It's the very first door when you come into Coover Hall on the second floor there, right next door to us here. Stop by and say hello. I'm not like I'm sitting in there desperately lonely waiting for you to come by, but I'm very happy to meet any student in this class. I'd love to get to know as many of you, if not all of you, on a first name basis, as this semester goes on here. TA, teaching assistant situation, is a little bit in flux. The department is trying to figure out exactly who is available for the times that we have set for this semester. I do have one TA, and there will be an actual name associated with the second TA. I will update Canvas if nothing else. I'll update this slide as well once we actually have the information for that second TA. Those office hours, though, are to be determined. It really depends on the availability of that person. I will be sure to update Canvas and even this slide as well once we actually know the TA's availability. John is not in North America right now, and the second TA is to be determined. So we will get you good TAs. I know John will be outstanding, so you're in good hands, even if he were to be the only TA, but we should get a second one as well. There's no TA photos available, but you'll meet your TA in lab next week when we have our first lab next week in this class. I also like to add my additional teaching assistants. That's Joey, Tessa, and Johnny here. Department budget constraints being what they are, I have to kind of look for all sorts of resources to help with the grading. They may do a little bit of grading. If nothing else, that's more than enough information for some password cracking attempts on me personally here. But those are just your additional teaching assistants here. We are all here to help, some more than others. But in this class, I think communication is really key. I think all students, but my class, this class, you here today, you have a little bit of responsibility to be active participants in the class. I can lecture for a couple hours to you every week. I'll get bored, you'll get bored. I'm not a very good lecturer. I need your feedback. I need your questions asked. I need your hands raised. Just feel free to speak up when you have questions. We will use Canvas. I'm kind of old school that way, primarily as a class web page. That didn't work. There it is. Primarily as a class web page. This is sort of the student view of it. It's by that I mean I don't use modules and unlocking module 2 and module 3 and module 4 and all that. Just sort of a static web page that contains, I think, all the information you need for the semester. So there's a top front page, which is the general info that includes things like when your lab sections are and eventually aspects of how to contact the TAs. I have the full syllabus on Canvas as well. I don't want to go through the whole thing Iowa State continues to add more and more required syllabus statements. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. You are responsible for eventually reading through the whole thing because that is kind of our contract. I do not expect any aspects of that syllabus to change, absent some typo that any of you finds, this week. This is our contract in terms of how the course is going to be run. The page will keep going back to sort of the static schedule page. So this is the week-to-week layout of how the semester is going to go. We're in week 1 here, on day 1 here. So for each weekly topic, what we're going to have is just a high-level view of the topic. I provide all the lecture notes, so those will always be available for you if you want to just download and have access to them. There will be a weekly quiz, and we'll be talking about that. That will be on our Thursdays, including this upcoming Thursday. And then after this first week, we'll have our weekly lab experience as well. So this table, this calendaring view of what the semester is going to look like, it's subject to tweaks. I mean, if we go too long or too short in a particular topic, things might get moved around a little bit. But for the most part, this is what the semester is going to be. So you should be checking Canvas effectively on a weekly basis. Yeah, go ahead. The quiz is going to be in class? Yes, they will be in class. And I'll talk a little bit about that if I have a slide on it. I think I do. We have a couple different flavors of quizzes here. Since you asked, I'll just bring it up now, and then if I repeat myself, so be it. I call them micro quizzes and more sort of macro quizzes. So our micro quiz, and we're going to have one on Thursday, is really primarily just an attendance quiz. Are you physically here in class? And I guess, are you emotionally here as well? Are you checked into class, basically is what that is going to be. It is a Canvas proctored quiz. I have it set for unlimited retakes. I want us to get it done in 5 minutes, so I don't want you to try, if it's a 5-question multiple choice, I don't want you to have to retake it 20 times to get the correct answers, but it's just meant to be an attendance quiz. Are you here? Did you show up to class? And then every 5 weeks or so, I'll have a more macro quiz, which itself, I wouldn't promote it to the level of a midterm exam. It's not really that kind of course where there's so many deep technical questions I would be asking you, but just really kind of more of the same flavor of questions. But that is meant to be sort of a checkpoint in the semester where I think we've covered some material, I think I've explained some things, and we're going to find out at those checkpoints here. Questions or just, sure, go ahead.
The macro quizzes would be graded in sense of not an attendance question, just...
Yeah, they're all going to be graded, and so...
Will it just be for attendance, like the macro quizzes, or...?
We'll get our first taste of it on Thursday, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not literally a click a button because I'm physically here in class. There will be some questions on it. I will set those micro quizzes so that if you get one wrong, you can go back and get the correct answer at the end of the day. However, they do have some value, even though you should all be able to get 100% on those micro quizzes. If you do get it wrong, and if you do get it wrong twice, you do get it wrong 3 times, and you have to go back in to get the correct answer, that's a sign maybe you need to kind of calibrate your understanding on that particular week's topic, right? Okay, you get a full score, you get whatever grade you're expecting, but maybe you didn't know it that well, so you have the responsibility then to go back and kind of look at the material and say, what did I not really understand about that? I would suggest that it's on a weekly basis that you do check Canvas. It's not required that you're constantly checking it on a day-to-day basis because it should be relatively static, but I will kind of release the lectures as I get them done. The labs are available, but they're also time kind of locked for technical reasons. We have to do that, but the materials there are available for you to kind of peruse and to get a feel for the class and to see what that upcoming week is going to look like. So it should never be a surprise what's happening in this class. When I said communication is key, I'm also attempting to use Discord. A few of you have connected to our Discord. We'll see how that goes. It's a nice kind of less formal way to reach out when you have questions or comments or even suggestions, or you read an interesting article and you'd like to share it with the class. You're welcome to do that. Let's give it a try. Email is probably appropriate when it's sort of one-on-one communication with me, right? Which is, I have this issue and I need to talk to you as professor of the class, instructor of the class. We'll use email still for that. That's fine. Discord is meant to be kind of the class discussion. So we'll see how that goes. It's really a function of your activity level. I can only do so much there. It should be a nice way that, let's say you're working on lab number 4 and something's just not working the way you expect it to be. If you're in the lab with your TA present, you just ask the TA who is present for help. If you're working on it outside the lab environment, outside of the lab scheduled time, of course, try things. Don't just try it once and then give up on it. Try a couple things, try to figure out what's going on, and then use Discord. Post a message, post a screenshot saying, hey, I'm seeing this, what's going on? I think you'll get a response pretty quickly. But that really depends on a class-by-class basis, the culture of online discussion, or whether everyone feels pretty comfortable not doing that. I'd be very happy if we have a very active Discord for class discussions and lab Q&A and things like that. I already showed a version of this same table with our general course organization. The goal is on our Tuesdays, we'll have the overview of the big picture concepts with hands-on demos depending on the topic and how easy it is for me to put together a hands-on kind of demo of technology. Hopefully, it's not just me talking to you for 50 minutes. I can do it. I'm contractually obligated to do it, but I'd rather we have more of a kind of collaborative, discussion-based atmosphere here. Thursday is going to be our weekly quiz, and then that'll be the very beginning of our Thursday lecture time. And I mentioned this here, Canvas will be our schedule page, and that's where you're going to go on a weekly basis. Find the lecture slides. If I get videos working, you might have seen me struggling with the technology here. If I get my videos working, I'll just post those on YouTube in case you want to review things. That's where all the actual submission and grading will be taking place as well, as is pretty standard across, I think, all of your other courses here, as well as what I list as the related reading, because we do have available to you 2 online adaptions of what I would call a fairly typical certified ethical hacker certification guide as kind of the backing material for this course. There's probably 24 different books that fall into that general bucket of books. These 2 are fine. They have a couple things going for them. First off, through Iowa State's O'Reilly subscription, I write here that they're available entirely for free. That's a bit of semantics. They're available entirely with no additional cost to you at the current time is how I would describe them. So they are available. They are on Canvas for you. So that's nice. You don't have to go out and purchase anything. It's the O'Reilly book viewer. I also kind of upload the PDFs, however you want to be able to kind of consume those books. This topic of ethical hacking, pen testing, is somewhat commoditized, and such. Every book you will find on the topic is going to be very same-ish. It's got to cover the same things. This class, if it's going to cover that topic in a credible way, is going to cover a lot of the same things. I said there's a couple dozen books that fall into that bucket. They're all going to have roughly the same topics. I chose these 2. I could have chosen one or none, really. They just take a different approach to really the same topic. So the Matt Walker book is very kind of conversationally written. It's like somebody, you're hanging out at the bar and they're kind of discussing the topic with you. You may like that, you may not like that, whereas the second book, the Greg and Santos book, is very textbook oriented. It's maybe what you would expect in a textbook. These are supporting materials. They are not required reading. What I will do, and where I think my responsibility is I will tell you on a week-to-week basis, a topic-to-topic basis, where we are in the books. I call it B1 and B2 for the Walker book and the Greg and Santos book, and I'll just say roughly where we are in those books. Let me just say, if I forget to do that, it'll be pretty obvious where we are in those books. The chapter headings will match the lecture headings, and it'll be very obvious where we are in those books. I will never say, well, you didn't read page 37 of the book, that's why you got this material wrong. That's not really how this kind of course is meant to operate. So they are supporting materials and not required reading. I think they can be very useful, though, to sort of strengthen concepts that probably, given the nature of a lecture, interaction here, probably can only be covered at a certain relatively high level. Or I said something in class that sounded interesting but didn't make a lot of sense to you. Look at that section of the book, you'll probably find a few pages written on that particular topic. or you did have a micro quiz and question 3 just felt like it was really weird to you, guarantee you'll find a version of that same question in one of those 2 references associated with the topic. Take some time and read about it. I try to make nice lecture slides, but no lecture slide is a textbook. And don't treat this as your textbook. These slides would make a very mediocre textbook. So I provide you those textbooks. You're all adults here. You're responsible for your learning. Not difficult reads. As you're learning about a topic, if you want to learn more about our information gathering as our first major topic, it's a pretty quick read to look at chapter 1 of both of those associated with textbooks. A general note about textbooks in this area: fundamentals are relatively well established and not moving terribly quickly, but the state of the art in terms of tools, vulnerabilities, exploits in cybersecurity in general, in pen testing in specific, it's sort of constantly changing. It is not feasible for us in this class or for any textbook in this topic to truly be bleeding edge in the sense of, here are some exploits that worked as of January of 2026. It's not really feasible. So we kind of have to pick sort of a snapshot in time. Certainly when you're writing a book, one has to do that. When creating a class, we have to do that as well and say, here is what is feasible given that assumptions under your environment. What that winds up resulting in is a textbook that may, in parts, read a little stale. It's kind of by design or by necessity. There's no way to avoid that. It may feel a little stale in parts. What there are is, once we go outside of a university environment or go outside of a textbook publisher, there's all sorts of other resources and references in this pen testing community that are there in all sorts of software forms, other forms. And I will, to the extent I'm able, share those resources with you as the semester goes on, and I guess invite you to do as well. So we'll be covering, circumventing firewalls at a certain level of technical depth. And in your reading, you find something else as well. Here's how this happens in January of 2026. Please feel free to share that resource. We have to take a snapshot in time to actually be able to run a course or to write a book in a particular topic. It's still very useful for understanding it is what it is there. So here is our view of the weekly layout. Earlier in the week, this is my view. Maybe this is my perspective on me as the week goes on. So I'm happy-go-lucky as our Monday comes along. We're Tuesday, we're still doing pretty well. Wednesday, kind of feeling a little blah, and then by Friday, we might be falling down. The only thing here that I need to put an asterisk on that I will change is potentially the TA office hours. But you do have a responsibility, of course, coming to class. That's Tuesday, Thursday at 11 o'clock in this room. I think we got a good number of you here today. You do need to be aware for this particular class, might have been for 2300 as well. Unlike some other classes, we do need to know which lab section you're in, and you do need to come to your particular lab section. So this first week of the semester and stretching into next week of the semester, we're okay. If you find you have to change your lab section, or you sign up for C, but A works a lot better, whatever it is, and for whatever reason you have, whatever trickle-down effects of changing other things in your schedule, that is okay. But by the end of next week, that does need to be fixed. And so that's in part due to the infrastructure we have for deploying and actually running the labs. So you do need to be aware whether you're in lab section A, B, or C, and the expectation is you attend that particular lab section. No lab this week. So you're good this week. Schedules can still be kind of shifted around this week. And I'll even say, because I understand life gets complicated, next week we're okay with something doesn't work out, you have to change something, or you overslept your lectures, lab section C, and you go to A, it's okay for next week. But after that, we have to have that locked down in terms of what lab section you are in and what time you are to be there. My office hours are also, I think, fixed for this semester. I have other courses. I don't get a ton of students in my office hours, but you're very welcome to come in even today. Questions about our weekly schedule or about anything so far? Okay. Here's the grading policies. This is primarily a hands-on applied discipline. You will be evaluated based on your ability to complete the weekly labs. you can see that, right? That is the majority of your score. That's 55% of your grade for this class will be how you do on the weekly labs. You're going to be okay. You got to show up to lab. You got to put in your time. You're going to be okay in this class. We're going to have the weekly micro quizzes and then the longer macro quizzes. And that's primarily an attendance score. But those macro quizzes, those 3 kind of checkpoints we'll have throughout the semester, that is my just snapshot check of how are we doing. It's an evaluation of me as well, but you're the one getting the grade, which is, how well did you understand the material at that point in the semester? And then I reserve the right to do sort of 5% for class participation. That has to become a bit more formal as the semester goes on. Do I know who you are at the end of the semester is one way I kind of try to be fair with my evaluation. Did you come to class? Did you speak up? Did you post on Discord? Did you come to office hours? Please, I don't want every single person in office hours today to get your 5%, but eventually stop by at some point, say hello, and we can make sure you get scored that way. There's no final exam for this course. We'll have 3 of the macro quizzes, and the third one, I think if we were to look at the schedule, it would be in that week 15. It would be in that quiet week at the end of the semester here. So there is no final exam for this course. We are going to use just the ISU, the default ISU grading scheme, and maybe I'm biased. I think we can absolutely hit a class 4.0. Part of that's on you. You have to want to get an A in this class. I firmly believe if you want to get an A in this class, you can get an A in this class. Not every class in your curricula have to be this grinding death march where you're struggling to get a B- at the end of the semester. That's not what this class is supposed to be. That's not my perspective on this class. I absolutely think we can hit a class 4.0. I say that a lot though, and it doesn't always happen. But I really believe you can do that. So if you'd like to get an A in this class, you can get an A in this class. Please show up on a weekly basis. You're going to do just fine. I also really appreciate and encourage kind of collaborative discussion in this class. What I expect of you on a weekly basis does start to ramp up. Now, it's not a very mathematical discipline, so it's not like, my calculus skills aren't good enough to kind of keep up with the material, but it does start to really build upon itself. And if you're not a little bit careful, what can happen in this class is if you kind of squeaked by lab 4 and then you get to lab 7, and those are arbitrary numbers here, you may find you have to go back and kind of look at lab 4 and almost sort of redo parts of lab 4 again if you really didn't kind of keep track of or understand what you are doing. So the difficulty does ramp up in that sense. It does build upon itself, even though it's not a calculus heavy class at all. So I think to succeed, one way is to just be resourceful and ask questions. Ask questions of me when you have me here. Come to office hours, ask questions, post questions online, ask your TA lots of questions. If you do that, you're going to be just fine. That virtualization platform we use does make it relatively easy for when you do have a question. Lab 3, this thing I'm trying to do just isn't working. I always say, well, what did you try? What did you attempt to do to fix it yourself, right? What debugging methodology did you employ? When that doesn't work, I'm very happy just to jump in or have the TA jump in and say, oh yeah, you actually typed this wrong, which happens quite a bit in this course. Here's what you need to type instead, and let's move on. We have that fixed for you. Yeah, go ahead.
Do the labs build on each other where, like, if you make a mistake in lab 3, could it affect your ability to complete lab 7?
To some extent. Now, not in all an unfair way, in my opinion. I've taught other courses, let's say in computer architecture, just to give an example, whereas if you didn't build your adder correctly, you're never going to get the rest of the processor working. This is not like that. It's not to that extent. But definitely there are parts in the lab where it says, you should know the password for this user account that you figured out in lab number 3. And again, lab number 3 is written such that you should be able to do that. Where sometimes students get a little tripped up is a big part of what we do in pen testing is documenting our efforts. And if you're a little lax in that, you may find, and boy, can this be frustrating when this happens, is I know exactly how to do this, but I forgot. I didn't write it down. I didn't write down the steps that I took. So there's a little bit of that. And it's all, I think, in my opinion, fair with regards to building upon each other. I'll try to make that clear when that happens, because it's not every single lab building upon every single prior lab, but there is some of that this semester. I like collaboration. I really appreciate discussion. Yeah, sure, question before we can.
For the labs, is part of your documentation
Really the labs, and I should talk more about the labs, probably on Thursday is where I'll get to it. Documenting is the labs, basically. So the labs is about documenting what you've done, and documenting is what you get evaluated on in a somewhat structured way. We will talk more about that, I hope, on Thursday. They are a little bit color by number in a sense of do this step, now do this step, now do this step. Another way to phrase that, I think, would be they scaffold your learning and knowledge so that you gain more and more expertise over time. But keeping track of what you're doing, journaling, logging, documenting your work is the whole point of that. And you will be graded, and you'll know on almost every one of those labs what your grade will be before you even submit it. Will be, did you document the steps of what you did? Did you provide the evidence we explicitly requested you to do? One thing I put in place when I kind of made my version of labs that other people have developed for this course is I try to make it perfectly obvious what you need to do to get a 100% on every single lab. There should be no ambiguity in terms of what did I need to do for this step, and if there is ambiguity, that's a sign I need to revise some writing that I put in there. So that part will be pretty clear. I want to talk about a little bit before we end for the day. So collaboration, great. Discussing with each other, but kind of a bolded but here, keep in mind that for all the assignments in this class, the expectation is that this is individual work, that you're submitting individual work. Now, I know that can be seen as in conflict potentially. I feel like I'm not talking to anybody who's over here. In conflict potentially with, I want you to collaborate, but don't copy anyone else's work. Well, I mean that. I want you to collaborate, but please don't copy anyone else's work. What you submit should be your own work. If you have a question about that, always ask the TA or ask me, ask anyone who's associated with the course. Because this is not a group-based, project-based class like that. Work entirely individually in terms of what you submit. I think that'll be obvious once you're actually in the lab and working on these things. Turn to the person next to you, hey, I'm having a little trouble with this part. What kind of things do you recommend? That's fine. Hey, can I have your parts 2 through part 5 for lab number 3? That is not fine. We're all adults here, as I said. I think that's obvious, but that is my policy. Let's not have to have that conversation at all this semester, but that is my policy. When I said you're responsible for reading the syllabus, I do try to lay that out as clearly as I can. I will check lab submissions in an automated way for closeness. There are ways I can check that in an automated way relatively easily, so please just don't cheat, you'll be fine. And I won't accidentally or unfairly catch someone for cheating. That's not my style either. Also, it will become pretty obvious to me if you make use of ChatGPT and similar services to contribute to your lab reports. I'm not expecting paragraphs of text for any of these questions, and if you provide paragraphs of text, it'll be pretty obvious what you've been doing. I actually don't think those resources do that great of a job on the labs. I've fed all the labs into the various different generative AI tools. They get some aspects of it right, but they still have big problems with making assumptions that aren't correct for our specific instances of the lab. So that may or may not be a great way to end today talking about please don't cheat, but I think you're going to be fine. I have created this class that I want everyone to get an A in this class while learning, hopefully having some fun along the way. I think we do hit that. It's going to be up to you, of course, as much as it is up to me. But I believe in us. I'm excited about how this semester is going to go. And I look forward to seeing everyone on Thursday as we have our very first micro quiz of the semester. Let's leave things here for today. Thank you.